morning. Glad you're here. Welcome. I'm Pastor Dave. If this is one of your first times here at Rhythm City, we'd love to invite you to fill out one of the connection cards on your table, and we'd love to connect with you. We really believe that the journey was never meant to be taken alone, that this whole following Jesus thing is not just an individualistic show up to church kind of thing, but that we'd love to actually invite you to relationship, a place where you can belong, a place where you can be safe, no matter where you're at in your journey with Jesus, which is why we believe in a rhythm of relationships. Relationship with God, relationship with other followers, and relationship with our city, too, as we love and serve our neighbors all around the city. So if you'd love to share that information on the connection card, place that in the offering as we collect that after the message this morning. We'd love to get to connect with you. A couple of really cool things that are happening coming up. In fact, this afternoon at 2 o'clock, we kind of celebrate the culmination of a lot of months of planning and a lot of hard work over the last couple of weeks with the Habitat for Humanity house build that we've been working on over the last 4 weekends. It's incredible to believe, but beginning of May, there was just a cement slab in a neighborhood, and today, I was there working yesterday with a team here and a team from our mother church, Our Savior, down the road a little ways, and we were putting sod down and putting in all the landscaping and everything and just doing finishing touches so that there can be a dedication for the house to Teresa this afternoon. It's just an incredible thing. So thank you for everyone who served. Come be a part of it. Let's go ahead and thank God for being a part of this and leading us. We just celebrate what God's doing, and that we get to be a part of what God's doing is a pretty incredible thing to consider. So come on out, 2 o'clock this afternoon. Information's on your Life and Rhythm sheets. 805 Ewing Drive is the address. We'd love to get to celebrate with you. Another way that we kind of invest in our community is every first Friday, we as a church here at Rhythm City go and invest in the lives of young people with an organization called Harvest Hands. And every first Friday of the month, we join their youth night and get to have fun with these kids, share devotion with them, invest in them, mentor them, and just love them right where they're at. And by loving them right where they're at, we also mean throwing dodgeballs at them too. So as part of youth night, they love being a part of it. They love having us be a part of it. Literally, they told me I was sitting down for lunch with Trey Dunn, who's the leader of this amazing ministry. And he was telling me that every week they get together, some of the kids come up and ask him, hey, is this the week Rhythm City's going to be here? And when we're not there, they're really bummed that we're not there, and they can't wait till we're coming back. So I'm telling you, kids are waiting. They've circled it on their calendar that Rhythm City's going to be there this Friday. So come, hang out with the kids, be a part of it, serve pizza, give them water and Capri Suns, and just enjoy loving on these kids right where they're at. And the reason why we do this is because we believe that the story of Jesus is to be shared in a way of knowing how it fits in someone else's story. For too long, the church has been shoving Bibles down people's throats, not caring about where they're at in their life. And so right now, we're doing a lot of listening. We're wanting to listen to these kids, to their families, learning their stories so that we can see how their story meshes with the story of Jesus. So come listen, get to share the story of Jesus a little bit, be a part of this as we serve and love our neighbors just down here at the Vine Hill Community Center. All the details are on there. You can sign up on our website as well. Probably the most important thing I want to share with you today, though, is that you have an opportunity to help send our team to Haiti. The team from Rhythm City, we're taking over a dozen people to Haiti in less than a month. It's just weeks away now. We leave on May 24th, and we're going to be down there for 8 days. And you get to help support this team and get this team to Haiti by answering a whole lot of trivia questions correctly this coming Saturday night. Now, you might think, I'm not very good at trivia, or I don't know how to do this. That's okay. You can buy the championship this weekend. I'm telling you, because you're supporting the team, it's giving money to a great cause. We will not be shamed by asking you to put another $5 down so you can Google something on your phone during the trivia night, okay? We totally give you that permission. So, here's the only bad news. You gotta sign up by the end of the day today. You can't wait till tomorrow. You can't wait till later in the week. We need you to sign up today because we're planning a fantastic meal for you. It's going to be a great night, tons of fun. You can sponsor team for $50 or $10 gets you signed up as an individual. So you can register. You have to register online. It's easy to find on our website, rhythmcitychurch.com. Whether this is your first time at Rhythm City or your 100th time at Rhythm City, come to Trivia Night this Saturday. It's going to be so much fun. I guarantee it. It's going to be great. And I'm actually the one forming all the trivia questions. You'll be happy to know that only 78% of the questions so far are related to the Chicago Cubs. So if you don't know anything about the Cubs, you still have a chance at winning. It'll still be a lot of fun. Today, though, we continue our series in the book of John. Today, we shift our focus to another series within a series, if you will, looking at what life would be like without Jesus. This is a very serious question that the disciples had to wrestle with the closer and closer they got to Jesus' death and resurrection. And we find that in John chapter 14 is where we're going to start. And then we're going to spend a few minutes in John chapter 15 and 16 this morning as well. So if you want to turn there, or if you want to open up the app on your phone, you can do that as well. But John chapter 14, I want you to scroll down to the very last few verses of this chapter and go to verse 27. Jesus says something here that sets the context for everything else that we're going to study this morning. And it has to deal with a very different perspective than what you and I are normally surrounded with. Here's what Jesus says. John 14, verse 27. Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." Now, he says peace. That's a really nice word. Everybody in our world loves the idea of peace, or at least most people do. We're all for world peace. But that's not the kind of peace Jesus is talking about here. The reason why that's not the kind of peace that Jesus is talking about is because the things that he's been sharing and what he's about to dive even more deeply into with his disciples is that they have to really wrestle with this idea that they're going to have to go on without Jesus by their side. They need to consider what is life without Jesus. Because Jesus starts sharing with them, I'm going away to be with my Father soon. My time is near. I'm about to be turned over. I'm about to be arrested. I'm going to be killed for the transgressions of the world. I'm going to be killed for your sins. And the disciples keep thinking, what's he really talking about? How can that really happen? They don't quite grasp the sincerity behind the words that Jesus keeps sharing with them over and over again. So in chapters 15 and 16, Jesus repeatedly and in great detail and depth draws them even deeper into the truth that soon everything's going to change because they're going to have to encounter life without him. So he says, peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. And then he says, I do not give as the world gives. This rubs you and I the wrong way. Whenever we, based on our perceptions and our reality, desire something that is influenced by the culture around us. Let me give you a couple examples of what I mean by this. You see, where the world would value swift revenge for some wrongdoer, Jesus values forgiveness. Where the world pursues instant gratification, Jesus gives eternal hope that is yet to come. Where the world looks to stockpile self for self-gain, Jesus gives away everything, including his very life. Where the world bases every decision based on their feelings, Jesus leads us by faith. Where the world only listens to itself, Jesus listens only to the Father. Where the world always wants to be first, Jesus says, the last shall be first. And where the world wants to be served, Jesus shows us what it's like to serve. And so when he says, almost as this this precursor to chapters 15 and 16, when he says, I do not give to you as the world gives, we should be clued in that everything he's about to offer us is of far greater value than anything we can acquire or attain here on earth, according to worldly culture, according to worldly values, if you will. And that might upset us a little bit. In fact, it might be the very reason why you have a bad taste in your mouth when it comes to a bad experience with religion or faith or Jesus or church in the past, because the very thing you were looking for wasn't given to you. Or maybe it's the reason why you've given up on prayer a little bit more in your life, because the very thing you've been asking for hasn't been resolved yet, or hasn't been given to you yet. Because Jesus doesn't give as the world gives. He gives a little bit differently. So as we start to dive in here and explore what it looks like to have life without Jesus, keep that in the back of your mind, because there's three realities that the disciples now have to face in chapters 15 and 16 that really give us some guidance on how we live our lives. Here are the three realities, and if you would, I would jot these down. As we go through this, we'll study them a little bit more, and then there'll be some implications for us and how that it impacts us. But there's three realities that the disciples face because of what we read in chapter 15 and 16 that I think we can probably resonate with a little bit. The first one is this: sorrow. Jesus comes along teaching and showing them his entire lives. They've been walking alongside each other for the better part of 3 years now. And now he's making it even more aware to them. His time is coming where he will die, be raised again, and go and be with the Father. And this, for the disciples, gives them a reality that they have to face, this sorrow. Number two is this: they are now losing their leader, their teacher, their master, the one who they've been serving. They're now losing their leader. And number three, the third reality that they now have to face is that Jesus' mission is now their mission. Jesus' mission is now their mission. More on that in just a minute. But if you want to look with me in chapter 16 here, let's go back and just kind of look through each of these three realities and explore just a little bit of how we connect with each of these. The first one was sorrow. In chapter 16, go down to verse 20. And here's where we see Jesus speaking to the disciples about their sorrow. In verse 20, he says this: I tell you the truth, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. Doesn't that automatically make you think of those few words in chapter 14? Jesus doesn't give as the world gives. You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy. And then he paints this picture of how we can expect this to feel and what it looks like. Verse 21, a woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come. But when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that a child is born into the world. So with you, now is your time of grief. But I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. In that day, you will no longer ask me anything. I tell you the truth, my Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. Until now, you have not asked for anything in my name. Ask and you will receive, and your joy will be complete. Here, the disciples are faced with the reality of sorrow. The one they've been following, their friend, their master, is now telling them he's going to leave them. That they're now about to be on this journey by themselves, even though he's promising them that while they will be in their sorrow for a little while, there will soon come a counselor, Jesus says. The Holy Spirit will come and guide them and walk alongside them every step of the way, even though Jesus won't physically be with them. And for them, that's good news. That's what helps turn sorrow into joy. And for each and every one of us, that idea of sorrow is not something we love to dwell on. In fact, our prayers for instant gratification, our prayers for resolution in our conflict in a more immediate way, our way of wrestling between my timing and God's timing causes our sorrow sometimes to be even deeper. Because when we're in that sorrow, we long to be delivered from it. And then if you look a little bit earlier here, in verse 16, John 16, verse 16, Jesus clues them in on this just a little bit more. He says, "In a little while, you will see me no more. And then after a little while, you will see me." Some of his disciples said to one another, "What does he mean when he says, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'? And because I'm going to the Father?" They kept asking, "What does he mean by a little while?" We don't understand what he's saying. You can imagine why they're not understanding. Now, you and I, we stand on this side of history, and we can look back at the story and we see what Jesus means when he says, "For a little while you will be grieving, but after a little while you will see me again." Jesus is clearly painting the picture for them what's going to happen in the days to follow. You see, we're here in the book of John at just the point where we're hours away from Jesus being betrayed, put on trial, beaten, suffering, being crucified for our sins. We're just hours from those moments. Jesus has already ridden into the city of Jerusalem on the donkey on that day we call Palm Sunday, this triumphal entry into the city. And here he confronts his disciples with this idea of sorrow. And yet, even in the midst of sorrow, he paints a glimpse of hope. And isn't that what so much of our faith is built on? And yet, what churns us a little bit, what frustrates our hearts from time, that in a world of instant gratification, we can't yet have what has been promised to us. That we can't yet have everything that Jesus died for. That we can't yet taste perfection. We can't yet have perfect relationship with the Father in heaven. That time is still coming. And yet hope is what we cling to. So Jesus lets them know right now, for a little while, you will experience sorrow. You will see brokenness. You will experience pain. But that time is short. And there's coming a time where you'll never experience that again. He says, your sorrow will turn to joy, a joy that no one can take away from you. That's good news that I need to hear when I'm in the midst of sorrow. It's a reality that the disciples face. It's a reality that you and I face. And it really leads us to that second reality that the disciples face, that here Jesus is laying before his disciples that their leader, their teacher, their master is now going away. If you had spent time with Jesus the way that his disciples did, it would pain you to know that your leader, the one who you imitate, the one who you follow, the one who you follow so closely that the dust that's kicked up by his heels, by his sandals, is covering you because you've been walking behind him for so many years now. That Jesus, that leader, is now going away. And so in that moment, not only are you sorrowful, but all of a sudden you feel lost. Now it's not just sadness, but now you're lost as well. You're looking for direction, you're looking for guidance, and if Jesus is going to go away for a little while, as he says to his disciples, then how will I know where to go? How do I know how to live my life? How do I know the direction in my life? All questions that the disciples are facing in that moment. And if that's not enough, the third reality that's heaped on top of them is now the very heavy burden that the mission that was once Jesus' is now my mission. all of a sudden, Jesus, well, maybe not all of a sudden, but now the disciples are catching on a little more and a little more that the thing that Jesus came to do is now the thing that the disciples are to do. Look in verse 12 here in John chapter 16. John 16, verse 12. Jesus says this, I have much more to say to you, more than you can ever bear. But when he, the Spirit of truth, comes, he will guide you into all truth. He will not speak on his own. He will speak only what he hears, and he will tell you what is yet to come. He will bring glory to me by taking from what is mine and making it known to you. All that belongs to the Father is mine. That is why I said the Spirit will take from what is mine and make it known to you. And if you rewind back into chapter 15, Jesus spells it out even just a little bit more. He says in verse 16 of John 15, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. Notice the difference there between the language of what Jesus talks about in terms of sorrow. You will experience sorrow for a little while, but he tells us that the very fruit that the disciples are going to bear will actually last. Fruit that will last. Then the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. This is my command. Love each other. Just in the span of a few verses here, the disciples become potentially overwhelmed with the reality of their sorrow. They're losing their friend. The reality that they're losing their leader and feeling lost. And the reality that the mission of Jesus is now their mission, that Jesus has now raised them in such a way, has trained them, has discipled them in such a way that now the very things he was doing, they can do. And Jesus says elsewhere in the Gospels that they can do them even better than he did. That would be what you call a milestone moment. If the Lord himself was sitting here and you'd been following him, you're covered in the dust from the roads and the trails you've been hiking and walking on for the last 3 years. And Jesus is having this intimate conversation with us. Things get pretty heavy pretty quickly. It's a lot to take in. As if the sorrow and losing your leader aren't enough to carry the weight of the mission of the Son of God is a heavy thing to carry. This last week, I was talking to someone on the phone who's considering a career change. And after talking to this person for about 10, 15 minutes on the phone, he asked me the question. He said, do you think I should make this move to jump into a new position? And what was interesting, it was actually a potential move from being in ministry, being on a staff of a church, and being a part of a different organization. And he said, do you think we should make this move? My wife and I and our kid. And I asked him, I said, what is it you guys hope to accomplish with your life? What's your goal as a family? What's the main thing that drives you guys? And he said, the number one thing is that we want to take everything we are, everything we have, everything God's given us, and we want to use it to show the love of Christ throughout our lives. I said, that's a pretty good answer. I like that answer. That's a good thing. And I said, well then, to be completely honest with you, it doesn't really matter whether you stay working at the church or if you take this new non-ministry position, because what's going to happen is no matter where you're at, God's going to put you in relationship with other people in such a way that you can use everything you are, everything you have, and everything God's given you to show his love wherever you are. I said, maybe the question for you to ask is, are you loving your neighbor where you live right now? Not, can I love my coworker in the new job? Because God's already put people in your neighborhood for you to love. And isn't it interesting that just that simple question reflects the very truth behind the burden, if you will, of what Jesus is proposing to his disciples, that he's chosen you, he's chosen his disciples to bear fruit that won't just last a little while, but fruit that will last. And it simply gets whittled down to loving our neighbor where we're at. Isn't that what he says? Verse 17. This is my command, love each other. If you go back just a little bit farther in chapter 15, this is where Jesus kind of gives the answer to how we deal with our sorrow, how we deal with, and how the disciples were to lead, or how to deal with losing their leader, and how we deal with the burden or the maybe overwhelming feeling of Jesus' mission is now my mission. And he unwraps it for us all in the first few verses of John 15. This is what he says. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit that will last, if you will, unless you remain in me. I am the vine, Jesus says. You are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. And in those very words, Jesus lets his disciples know that even though he might be gone for a little while, he's not leaving them. He says, if you remain in me, I will remain in you. And later on, he goes on to talk about the Counselor, the Holy Spirit, which will come to guide us and be with us and live in us through our baptism. But he says, I will remain in you. And so the question of what is life like without Jesus really is answered in the very words of Jesus, that life isn't without Jesus. And isn't it interesting that he paints this picture of what that relationship looks like? He talks about the vine and the branches. Now, yesterday I was out with our awesome team doing the landscaping work on the Habitat House. And one of our jobs was to plant a couple of trees in the yard. And, these trees aren't that big. They're pretty small trees, but doggone, those things are heavy. I'm feeling it this morning, still trying to lift some of those trees. And there was one tree, it's a maple tree. I don't know a lot about maple trees, but I think they get pretty big, right? Maple trees get pretty substantial. I mean, they're like, you set it up in your yard, and it's the kind of tree that kids swing from, from years and years down the road. But it doesn't really look like that right now. It's just a very puny-looking tree. Probably doesn't look like it has a whole lot of potential. But I'll tell you what, one of those branches was really beautiful. I mean, it was just perfect. The way the leaves were lined up on it and everything just looked so nice and beautiful and full of life. The terrible thing for me to do in that moment would be to say, that's so beautiful and I love that. I'm just going to snap that branch off and take it home with me, because I want it to flourish, and I want to be able to look at it every day. If I would have done that, there's no chance that those leaves would be as green today as they were yesterday. There's no chance that there'd be hope for life for that branch, that it could produce more leaves, more fruit, that it could become even more beautiful than it is today if I snap it off of the trunk of the tree. That's the picture that Jesus is painting here, and it answers the questions that we so often answer. God, where have you been in my life when I've struggled in this way? God, where have you been? Or why is it that I feel like I'm going through this sorrow on my own? Why does it feel like I am doing life without you, Jesus? And we find ourselves with this crippled up branch that's sitting in a corner, that's our lives, not attached to anything that can give it any source of nutrients, any source of life. And this whole time, the question isn't, God, where have you been? But the question becomes, have I even been connected to you? Have I been listening to you? Have I been receiving your life on a regular basis? And we find ourselves distanced from God. And that's what life without Jesus looks like. Shriveled up. Something with so much potential that could grow into something so beautiful and bear great fruit, beautiful leaves, so much color, ends up being shriveled up, dies, turns brown, and becomes undesirable. The invitation that Jesus extends to us today is life with him. So that when we do face sorrow and we do feel sad, when we go through the journey and the journey's harder than we thought, we remember that when we're connected to the vine, he gives us what we need to not just survive, but to become something beautiful. When we go through life feeling kind of lost because we're not sure which leader to listen to, we're reminded today to stay connected to the vine, to the life, the source of life, Jesus, who gives us our direction, who doesn't just stand off in the distance and say, hey, can you find your way already? But instead is the shepherd who leaves the 99 to go find the one, to find that sheep, to find you, so that you wouldn't be lost. And when you consider that the mission of Jesus has now been put into your hands, and you find yourself so complacent with religion that church becomes a place you show up to on Sunday instead of who we are in our neighborhoods and our workplaces and in our families. And we become so complacent to the point where we think we're plugged into religion, but nobody in our neighborhood or nobody in our workplace even has an idea that we care about them, let alone love them as our neighbor. Jesus says, remain in me, and you will bear much fruit. And those were not empty words, because just hours from this moment, he'd show his disciples what love looks like. He'd show and give us an example of how to care for the people around us by putting others before ourselves, by considering other people better than ourselves, when he laid down his life on the cross for you. So whether you're facing sorrow, whether you feel lost, or you feel complacent, life without Jesus leads you to more sorrow, leads you to being even more lost, to becoming even more complacent. My guess is that somewhere inside of you burns this desire to know what true joy feels like, to have a sense of direction in your life, and to not be complacent, but rather be a part of the greatest journey you could ever imagine. That doesn't just change other people's lives for a little while, but changes lives for eternity. Remain in me, Jesus says, and I will remain in you. That's the promise of the Lord over your life.